Jo from Vibrant Living Retreat and beautiful Sharron Martin. And we're going to talk about, what's the name of the place you're in again, just above Auckland?
In Manly, in Whangaproa.
Manly, Whangaproa. Wonderful. And yeah, we're just going to chat about awakening journeys.
Yes.
And yeah, I'd love to start with you. Yeah, just tune into where you want to start. But yeah, I would love to hear more about, well, first of all, we know each other for quite a while. Sharron's been to my retreat and I've had sessions with you. I've been to your place as well. So
Yes.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I'm feeling really excited to actually hear more about your actual awakening journey. Because often when we meet each other, we're in the moment of whatever's happening. So we don't always sit around reflecting on how we got to that particular moment. So would you like to share well, actually, maybe even just start by sharing, what does awakening mean for you?
Well, that's a good question. What does awakening mean for me? I think it's about awakening, opening up to your own divinity, becoming aware of your own inner essence and your connection with the divine. That to me is what awakening is. And the journey of awakening for me, as I see it, as I've experienced it, has been a series of undoing. It's been about releasing in order to gather more light, to then have something else that comes up in order to be released. So it's about releasing all the programs and all the paradigms and the family patterns and the past life patterns, paradigms, lessons, karma, all of that. I used to think that it would be this illuminating journey, but for me, my journey has been a journey of undoing and releasing. And now that I work as a practitioner, I recognise that in other people. Unless people have an awakening where they are, hit with lightning, or they are hit with a piece of 4x2 over the head or something, and then they have this instant awakening, I think like a recognition of illumination. They see beyond the veil, and so they have a different experience of awakening.
Mm-hmm. So like a near-death experience, or just a moment of transcendence?
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily stick either. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. So there have been people struck by lightning who are awakened and then it disappears on them again. Mm-hmm. There are people who fall over and hit their head and they have a near-death experience. They see the other side of the veil. They, have reconnections with people who have passed, and they have an understanding that there's more to their world than they realised before. But that doesn't always stick either. But I guess that creates a searching for those people.
Well, you used to have another life, because often we talk about we've had many lifetimes, because it feels like we've had so many different experiences on this journey. So what was more, Sharron would say, in her less awakened state? What was life like for Sharron then? Who was she then?
Well, I've been a teacher and an educator for a lot of my life. And I loved that work. I really loved that work. I know I made a big difference to a lot of children. And when people would ask me what I would teach, my sort of gut response to that would always be, well, people mainly, because I always saw whatever subject I was teaching as the delivery for helping people grow. So I really loved that work, and I knew from, I don't know, quite a young age, probably my awakening experiences, I suppose they started to happen maybe in my late teens, for example. I would have a lot of dreaming that I would remember. I would have a lot of times when I was awoken to write poetry that was just streaming, and so I'd be woken up and I would do that. But I would often walk with Jesus in my dreams, and frequently with Mother Mary. So I always
to have there.
Pardon?
Good friends to have there.
Yeah, and I work very closely with them still, but Mary, when I would walk with her, I didn't converse with her, but I walked beside her, and I knew that I must have been getting something, but I didn't know what it was. Whereas with Jesus, I could have conversations with him and ask questions, and we would just walk along the beach basically. So I guess those were my early experiences. I knew from probably in my 20s, hard to remember exactly, but I knew that I was here to be a teacher, and I knew that I was to be a teacher beyond the traditional education system. That was my training, I suppose, my beginning development, to be able to become a teacher for the world in some form. And so I knew that would take me to that place.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? So, we talk about the awakening as well, what are we waking up out of, or what do we realize? And so there's that sense of, in a way, having a new level of awareness or realization that things aren't what we thought they were, that we're waking up out of that. So did you have that feeling as a child?
Well, I think that I always knew a lot as a child. And I think that I had, I don't know, I guess when I look back on that time, I think it was just shut down because it didn't fit. But I don't know. And when I speak to my mother about it, she doesn't have a memory of any because of her own experiences. She doesn't have a memory of a lot of things from any of our childhoods. But I think for me, it was my ability to see. So I have been clairvoyant for a long time, but I didn't know it. I thought everybody saw. And it wasn't until even quite recently, in the last half a dozen years or so, that I realised that not everybody sees the way that I do. So I see, and at times it's like being in a virtual reality. It's like being in a movie set where I can be all the actors and the director and the audience and the person sitting on the boom and the cameraman. So I can sit in each of those places, and also I can hear, and I have all of the clairs basically.
The inner sight and auditory.
Yes, and that clear cognizance, that knowing things that just come from within, from cellular memory. So
with that, then, in the old consciousness,
yes,
what were the challenges to have all that?
Well, I didn't know that other people didn't have it, so I didn't know that there were any challenges with it.
Because that's a lot of the reason is as kids, generally most kids do come in with some level of that, but as you said, gets shut down, or it's not encouraged or whatever. So it's very interesting that you went so long without even realizing that other people didn't,
I know, because you don't share those experiences, or I didn't to the same extent. And so when I started going to meditation, and people would say, oh yes, well I saw a colour, and then I started to realise that was what many people, that is what they saw. So, when people would say that they see, that they are, but that's what they're seeing. So I didn't ever make those sort of comparisons. And I think the streaming poetry was a part of my awakening. And I think also I've always had a huge amount of empathy for anybody really, and everybody, whether they were in my current reality or even on television. And so I started to recognize really strong reactions to things on television as a teenager, where I couldn't face watching things because they were so strong. And so that was my kind of foray into recognizing past lives. So I could not watch snakes on the television screen. I would have to leave the room, and I would be quite frightened, and I would have nightmares. And so I had to do a lot of self work around that, to even be able to touch a picture of a snake in a book.
Wow.
So that made me think, well, I live in New Zealand. We don't even have snakes here. So why, you know, so that was my beginning kind of inquiry about past lives. And now I do that as part of my work. I take people on past life journeys or on journeys to the Akash and look into their past lives in relation to things that are happening to them in this lifetime.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, when you said when you were a teenager, you noticed this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you able to just kind of go in your own psyche and support yourself, or did you have people around you that you could book a session, like people book a session with you? Did you have
No, I didn't have any of that. It was just my rational, logical brain that went, well, I'm terrified of snakes. There are none in this country. Therefore, I must have been somewhere else. I must have lived somewhere else. I must have had another experience.
Yeah, even
so that kind of was my,
you know, rationale is quite something, because not everybody even would even come to that.
I guess not.
Especially
Yeah, so that was my beginning with all of that.
And what about, so it sounds like it's always kind of been there. You just weren't really aware that it was there, that people were different. Did you have any big moment that was, you know, that just kind of rocked your world? That you could, you know, that still kind of is a pivotal moment for you of awakening?
No, I don't think so. I think I just had a whole lot of little mini moments that took me, you know, just one more click of the cog. And, you know, it's not that I didn't have big moments, but I didn't have a massive moment. It's been about learning how to surrender. And so I remember, so I was really prompted to leave my work, even though I loved it. I really got prodded by spirit to leave my teaching work. And so the only way that I could see that I could begin was because it felt as though I needed to begin my journey in a spiritual sense. And so the only way I could do that was to sell my house. And so that was a big thing, actually, to sell my house, to pack everything away, to get rid of things, and to step into that unknown. So that was a fairly big thing to do. And then, yeah, pardon?
When did you do that? That was only a few years ago, right?
Yeah, I did that in 2012, I think, or 2000. Yeah, I think 2012. So then I went to Southeast Asia for a few months. I went on my own and joined into some tours and kind of got to know who I was really through the reflection of others, as people were saying to me, oh, you're just so cruisy and so laid back. And I'm thinking, that's so untrue. Uptight and intense. But I guess in comparison to other people, you know, maybe I wasn't. So yeah, so that was my sort of beginning journey. And to be honest, I had this idea that this anticipating this letter from God, basically, to tell me what I was meant to do next. And so that was a really big disappointment for me. Never turned up. And I thought, you know, okay, I've sold my house, I've left my job I loved, and I'm here and I'm waiting. And why can't you tell me? Why can't you tell me what it is I'm meant to do and where it is I'm
thank God.
Yeah. So that was, you know, I guess the prodding about surrender. And I remember when I got back, I went and lived with Mum for a while, and she lives on this beautiful beach in the Coromandel. And I was walking along the beach one day, and I declared, right, I'm ready. I am ready to do my work. And so bring it. And I was basically cast into my bed for the next 3 weeks in excruciating pain, as though my head had a band of metal in it that someone was winding open. It was that painful. I felt like I was in a torture chamber, and it went on for 3 weeks. I didn't get out of bed other than to go to the toilet. I hardly ate. And so that was all about releasing, you know. And I remember ringing a friend and saying to her, I just don't know what to do. And she said, you've got to surrender. And I went, I know, but I don't know how. I've got no idea how to. It was not within my way of being.
And so did you get some insight in those weeks of what that really was? I know it was releasing and surrender, but what did you get an insight on what you were really, what was the tightness in the head? What were you letting go? Was it that mental programming?
That mental programming, and the fact that I ran everything through my head instead of through my heart, even though I felt a lot of things in my heart and in my higher heart and in my soul, I didn't process through that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it was all about that, I think. Yeah. So it took me a long time to learn about surrender. And the best lesson I had about surrender was I would text my son, who was in Auckland, and he wouldn't answer me. And then I would get really frustrated, and I would run my story of he doesn't love me, he doesn't give a toss about me. And as soon as I went, and I walked the beach every morning, it was how I started my day. And as soon as I would go, oh, you deal with it, God. As soon as I could do that, I would start to get a response. But I had to get pushed to that several times before that clicked into place. I was a very slow learner in that regard. But yeah, this idea of, you know, making up all the story. And then what I learned about it was, I think the first time I handed it over to God, I heard from him the next day. The second time I handed it over to God, I heard from him within a couple of hours. And the third time I handed it over to God, he texted me when I got back from my beach walk. So that was my kind of journey about learning about surrendering. But I would say I'm still learning to do that. You know, I have a really good mental mind, I guess. You know, that comes with being a 5. 5s are very much in the mental mind. And that's part of our learning, is to learn to use the mind as a tool. So yeah, that's been my journey in that regard.
So talk to that, actually, using the mind as a tool. Does that mean like from the heart, utilizing the capacity of the mind to express, or what do you mean? What's the higher consciousness way of using the mind?
Well, you can use the mind to process a lot of information, to gather data, to analyze things, and then you can use it to make decisions, but it's not the place to make decisions from. So the idea is to use the mind to do all this processing, but make your decision from your heart. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the mind's a great processor. It's, you know, it's a phenomenal computer, really. Mm-hmm. But when we make decisions from the mind, they're more ego-driven. So we need to drop out of the mind and into the heart, so that it's emotionally driven and it comes from that higher place, or that deeper place.
Connected place rather than the separated identity place.
Yeah.
So it's being guided for the highest good of all, right? When we come from the heart, plugged in to what we're all plugged into. Yeah,
that's right. And you can't sit in the heart and be in worry or fear or any of those negative emotions that drive a lot of our behaviors.
A big one, control, because I think that's what you're talking about as well. You know, that impatience, because when you're talking about your son, I get with my doggy, you know, and I've learned in the walks in the forest is like, I'll be getting like, oh, come on, you know, where is she? And then I'm like, okay, just take a breath, Mary Jo. And I think I'm so calm. And then all of a sudden I get really impatient, you know, and I'm making demands. Where are you? Come back. Where are you? And I keep shouting, and I'm listening to myself going, patience, take a breath. And then I take a breath, and then the mind is like, oh, what if she's lost, or what if she's done something, you know, inappropriate, or blah, blah, blah. And then every time, she's such a little teacher, every time I let it go and I sit down on the tree and I really let it go, just like you said, I can't pretend to have let it go. I have to really go, come into my breathing, be present to where I am, be present with the nature of the tree, and really just allow. And she comes dawdling over. And I just wants to go, oh, you're so cute. Thank you for being my teacher again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right about, you know, that's the duality, isn't it? Control at this end and surrender at this end. And for me, I was just such a slow learner to get from that end to this end. And even, you know, even now, it's still a part of, you know, my regular recognition. okay, that is just being controlling, just let it go, just hand it over.
The needing to control and the needing to know seem to be two.
Yes, needing to know has been a big one for me too. So people who, people who are in their mental minds, those are two very big things. So people who are working with a 5 or with a 2 or a 22, they have minds that are magnificent machines, really. They are, phenomenal pieces of processing equipment. But we that's part of our learning, is to learn how to use it in a way that's productive and helpful and supportive, and then to make the heart the driver of the answers.
So with all your experience, what advice would you have for people who would be kind of resonating with this, how to balance, that heart-mind, that mind-heart? How have you found? What works best for you?
Oh, well, what I teach my clients is to practice dropping the breath. So I get people to put their hand over their head and to take a breath and imagine that they're breathing in behind their hand, so they can feel the breath coming into the crown. And sometimes it takes a couple of breaths to be sitting there. Okay, so you're there now. And then in front of your forehead, do the same. Breathe in behind. Okay, that's taken longer for you to get to there.
I've never done this before. I'm just imagining the breath between my hand, or
yes, yeah. Okay, and then drop it to your throat and do the same. Okay, so you're immediately there, aren't you? Yeah, and then to the heart. And so then you can sit in that space and you make your decision from that space, which is really soft. So yeah, I get my clients to practice that for a little while, and usually if somebody practices that a few times a day for a few days, they'll just be able to go breathe here, breathe to here.
So that's just a way of dropping the energy from the mental processing down into the heart.
Yeah. So it's just bringing your focus with the breath and then dropping it down into here. So this is just a step-by-step process when you begin.
Good. I'm just going to let my little doggy in. She's at the door. Wonderful. So would you talk a little bit more about maybe the numbers and the work that you do? Where it's led you, where God has led you, or where you've led you as the God of you?
Yeah, well, I think, where is it? Well, the work I do now has come from that being interested in past lives. And I started to play around with this idea of experiencing my own past lives. And that was early on. In my 20s, I started channeling the Ascended Masters. And it's sort of one day in meditation, I got this message to say, you're going to begin channeling, at which point I totally destroyed the entire room of people who were meditating by bursting out laughing, because I hadn't ever heard anything quite so ridiculous. The idea that would happen was just a nonsense to me. And honestly, I just cracked up laughing out loud. And I think 2 days later, I meditated regularly, I meditated twice a day. And I asked Spirit, well, why have I got such a headache? And the answer I heard was this very kind of dry humour of, well, try opening your mouth. And I opened my mouth and out came things. So I had that experience. And I played with the idea of stepping through tunnels and counting myself down and visualizing myself walking through over bridges and things like that. I played with a whole lot of that, and I could find myself in a different place, and so I could begin to explore my own past lives. And then I did a bit of a course with Chris Wilson, and even she said to me, I don't think you really need to do this with me. I think that you can just do it. And I said, well, I can, but you know, I want to have this experience with you because I'm sure that I'll learn things from it. And I did. You know, I learned about using prayer and setting up sacred space and things like that in terms of doing that work. Yeah, so now I do quite a lot of that work. I do a lot of work in the Akash, a lot of amazing, I mean, it just blows me away every time.
So for anybody that may be listening and the Akash that already know what that is, what is the Akash for you? Well,
the Akash to me is one name for the records that are kept for all souls, especially, I mostly deal with people's earth records. So back through time, all of the soul's experiences on earth are held, at the moment they're held in the ethers, and that looks like a giant ancient library to me, and I could draw it and explain it and do an architectural drawing of it, but anyway, it sits in the ethers. But right now we're having our new Akashic records are already in existence in the center of the earth. And so they are sitting in a helix formation in a crystal tube of selenite, and each being has one of those. And my understanding is that the old records it looks to me like they defrag, they turn into fractals, it dissipates, it disappears, but they're still there at the moment. As we move more into our fifth dimensional world, we won't have any need for those because everyone will have their own inner knowledge and inner workings of that. Mm-hmm. And all the karma will have been addressed. Mm-hmm. And so there won't be too much purpose for going there. But yeah, it's really beautiful work, and people get given initiations and they get shown past lives that totally relate to things that are going on in their world now, and then we can kind of undo those. Are you seeing these past lives in their Akash, or are they seeing them themselves? Are you taking them through a journey to see them? I take them on a journey, yeah. So everybody does that differently, but I tend to take people on a journey. And so often people who can see a little bit, they can see things. I seem to be able to hold space for people to see while they're in there. Not everybody, yeah, but for many. So would you call that past life regression? No, I call it a past life journey because I'm not regressing people. Mm-hmm. But people will often, so I kind of narrate the story, but often they will see things that I'm narrating, and they don't always tell me, you know, because people like to make you work for what you're doing. But afterwards they'll say, oh yeah, I saw all that. The story, does that just come to you to say in specific to that person? Yes. Yeah, so I get given information. So I might get given a name. I will see an image that a story unfolds, and you know, various components that might indicate a lifetime in a particular place, or an ascended master or an archangel or a being in history, and they, you know, I will sometimes get given their name and where they were and what their relationship was with other people in that space and how that links into relationships in this lifetime. So it's kind of, I guess for me, it's very linked into work that people need to do, or that work that's being made available for them to do. It's not it's not a fun thing. Let's go and see, you know, where you were a queen in your lifetime. I'm sure that I could do that, but that's not the focus of my work. The focus of my work is to help people learn what they need to learn, undo what they need to undo, sever ties that hold them and bind them, improve relationships that can do with some help. And more and more my work is about helping people with their soul mission. And more that is becoming stuff that is really in the unknown. So people are being shown things that are very new concepts that they will come into, you know, in our new world.
Oh, exciting! I bet are people very shocked, or can they feel the resonance with it, or is it?
Yeah, people can always feel that resonance with it, even, you know, even if they haven't had those experiences before, because people will be moved emotionally. They might cry as your soul recognizes these things. And so feeling, you know, shivers down the body, or a heart opening, or tears, or all of those things happen.
And the other part that you do is the Gaia. I'm just looking at that picture behind you, that beautiful painting. Tell us about that painting and the work.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I began to see her, I don't know when now. I do need to create a video about this, but maybe around 2014 or so, I would begin to connect into the centre of the earth and began to see her. And then a friend of mine who paints the Ascended Masters, I said to him one day, when are you going to paint Lady Gaia? And he looked at me and he said, well, I think you are. And I went, maybe. Thinking, well, that won't be likely. And so I waited, you know, so for me, because I always, you know, I push, I get things going. And so I waited and I waited and I really sat back. Until one Easter I was just prompted, get out and get up the road and buy a big canvas. So this is a little print. The original is about 1200 by 900. But anyway, this is her in her maiden form. And yes, I have this, it seems like I have work to do with her. So one of my roles with her is to have painted her so that people can have a personal connection with her. She's the goddess, the personification of the goddess Gaia, Lady Gaia. And, you know, she wanted me to paint her so people can maybe, you know, create this personal connection and take greater care of the earth because they have a personal connection with her. And so one of the things that I've been doing is bringing through messages from her. So I astral travel to her, I guess, or bilocate, or go through my heart and drop in. But I physically am with her. And, you know, it's got more and more real. And sometimes lately it's been like sitting around with a sister having a cup of tea in the centre of the earth.
You're not in lockdown alone.
No. Well, I flat with the Ascended Masters anyway, I guess. So, yeah, so it's been, you know, I have felt very blessed and very privileged to be able to build this relationship with her. And I know that it will continue, and I know that I have work to do when we move into our new world, that I have work to do in bringing her voice through to others. So yeah, she gives me updates on where we're heading and what's coming in energetically and what we need to be working on.
And what are you doing with that information?
Pardon?
What are you doing with that information?
I write it up as blogs. I put out a newsletter, and I have created a YouTube channel that's specifically, it's not all about her, but it's a big focus to be, letting people know what it is that she has to say.
So in terms of what you're doing, am I right that you've got the Gaia work, the videos and the emails and the newsletter, you've got the sessions happening one-on-one with people, anything else?
Well, I run a meditation group at home, but that's not happening at the moment, of course. And then I paint, you know, one of the jobs that Spirit has given me is to paint the etheric temples. So I've painted a few of those. So
what's the intention behind that? Or, you know, you just talked about Gaia having a greater connection with her. Is that the idea with these etheric temples, so that we can feel that resonance? Yeah,
so people can step in. So the paintings behave like a portal, and so people can energetically step into them, so they can visit the Temple of Abundance, they can visit the altar of the Divine Feminine Christ, they can visit the energy of Mother Mary. There's a painting of that, and yeah, so that's the idea, so they can connect with the masters who work with those particular temples, and step into them energetically.
So for somebody who would be quite new to that idea, what could they expect, from an experience like that, the impact that it may have on them?
Well, energetically they will feel it. So it's been interesting for me. I've been taking them to the markets over the last year, or I guess the last half a year. And it's interesting, how many people come up and say, I felt the energy of that painting when I walked into the hall, or I was stopped as I was walking past because I could feel the energy of that painting. So they carry, even though they are prints, they still carry the energetic imprint of the original. And so people just have they look at them all and they feel into the one that is in alignment for them. So ultimately they will each come with a guided meditation.
Beautiful. And so are you doing that now? You're offering the prints and the guided meditation now? You have that?
Yeah, because I have a website.
What's your website?
So my website is sharronmartin.com.
Yeah, and your YouTube channel where you do the videos?
That is Inner Sanctum NZ.
Inner Sanctum NZ.
Yeah. So my name has 2 R's in it, and it's probably just as easy to go to my website and find your way to the other things from there to YouTube. Do
you want to fill it out then?
So it's SharronMartin.com.
Okay, not NZ. That's good to know.
Yes.
And
so it's kind of my whole life now is this work. And it is. It's different, and it's rewarding, and at times it's challenging because it's new. It's new to many people that I would have a personal relationship with Gaia, for example.
Yeah. And I guess, it's like, but you've been taking that time to really establish yourself for what's ahead, That's
yes.
Like creating a strong platform in your work and what you've got online, like many of us and many people are, so that when this huge second wave of awakening is happening, that it's just available for people.
Yes, that's right. And she speaks of the second wave being 10 times the size of the first wave.
It's interesting. Matt Kahn says the same thing. I think it was him who said the exact same thing.
Say that again.
Matt Kahn said the exact same thing.
Oh, did he? Okay.
I think it was him who said it. Somebody said it. I've definitely heard that.
Right. Yeah.
So
yes, it could have been me. Yeah. So that's why people like us have, I guess, been prodded to begin. It comes with its challenges, doesn't it? Setting up new paradigms and new platforms.
What would you say has been some of your biggest learning, or some things that you really had to make peace with, or just some of those challenges?
Trust. So trusting that everything is in hand and is planned and is not in my hands. Well, it is in my hands in terms of, my inner self, my higher wisdom has created this plan. But the timing thing is very difficult for me to get a grip about, the timing of things.
When you mean?
When things might come about, because I have a tendency to do things earlier than maybe I ought to have. So I try to sit back a little bit more now until I'm really sort of prompted and guided.
Yeah, I know what you mean, actually, especially over this lockdown period. It's been interesting, and you may have noticed as well that I know before, or yeah, probably would it be since the beginning of this year? I think it was maybe back in December I started noticing it first, especially this year, or maybe even longer. But I just noticed that anytime I did anything from a doing with that extra push, it just didn't work. And when it came
Yes.
from the heart, and when it came from the inspired motion, and I had no attachment to it either, then
Yes,
magic.
exactly.
And
That's been my experience as well.
yeah, the
You
less
try
I
to push
do,
to
the
make
more.
something happen, doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you sit back and you conjure it up and have no expectations and then take inspired action, then it drops in.
Yeah, because often that mind, because we hear, especially having your own business, is like, there's so much expert advice on how you should do it, and then it's like, oh, I need to write an email, or I need to write a newsletter, or I should be doing this or that, or it's been so long since I've done that, so I kind of need to tick that box. Doesn't work anymore, not for me.
No, and I started like that. I was, I came from having a lot of structure in my work and, running 5 classes a day with 25 to 30 students in it, and sometimes each of them on an individual program. And it doesn't work now. That in my life, that structure, I've had to undo that structure for a start. But what you're saying is so true. So, I started off putting a weekly meditation together, sending out a weekly newsletter, and that doesn't work for me anymore either. I need to be much softer. It's about really being in flow and really being guided to what comes next. And then it can come quite quickly and quite instantly. And so we just have to drop deeper into our hearts and deeper into trust that there are greater things at play.
Feel that level as you were talking, that level of deeper in means letting go of control. Even sometimes it can be subtle control.
Yeah.
The agenda, right. Of to do in order to get.
Yes. So if I have things like, well, I really want to have this many clients this week and I want to be able to get out 3 videos, no. It doesn't work. But if I say, I want to attract the people I can help the most today, if you can bring them along for me, that will be fantastic. And I'm really feeling the blessings of this beautiful day with the weather and the birds and the trees and the amazing people that I'm meeting.
All the gratitude is the heart, isn't it? From that open heart energy, that beautiful Mother Mary, Divine Mother, real energy, isn't it? So much deep love and compassion. So when it comes from there, it's such a different offering.
Yes, it is. And so undoing that, a whole old 3D paradigm of, make the plan, and well, if you're a diver, you probably still have to do it. Like when I was a scuba diver, that was one of the rules. You make the plan and then you dive the plan. So the people who are on the surface know, where you are and what your intention is. Yeah. But in life now, we have to throw that out the window and really be present, be very centered in the body with the breath, and just be guided to be in appreciation and gratitude as well. And that, it's like that somehow creates the momentum for bringing things in.
The allowing. And is there anything else you want to add in? But what I was going to ask you is if you had, to people who are, just newly awakening. I know some, obviously we know that's what's happening. So many people are newly awakening, and now of course in lockdown there's such an exposure to information, and so there's such an opportunity as well for people to spend hours and hours soaking up different videos and information, which is awesome. But we know it can get overwhelming and take one all over the place as well. What advice would you have to somebody who's maybe maybe the awakening is losing their job, and they've decided, actually I didn't even like that job, and discovering.
Yes, I think that will happen for a lot of people at the moment. Gaia said that partway through last year, that people will find that they are a little bit shunted almost. They've been, they're like pushed to be living somewhere else, to be doing another job, to change relationships. As things come to a close and the new begins, anyone who's not in the right place, their soul will shift them. And, we're at definitely there's more of that happening again now. We're in another wave of that as this new world is coming into being. But I think that my advice to people is to be gentle, with themselves, and to not make too many rules for themselves. That even in meditation, there are a lot of ways that people can meditate, and people who a lot of men, the masculine in our world, their way of meditating is often quite action orientated. So, you know, many people can meditate through walking, for example, through walking in the bush, through walking on the beach, Steve, he meditates while he's out riding his bike. You know, people meditate windsurfing and hang gliding and all of those kind of adventure sports. They just get into the moment and can let their mind just be a little bit more sort of, I guess, running free. And yes, to know that meditation can take many forms, that's one thing. That being present and to use the breath to become present, that's a really good piece of advice that I would give to people. To know that it will all unfold. You know, so we stay present in the moment, we're centered, we are working with the breath, and we are in the knowingness that the next thing will be shown if we allow it.
Learning to flow with it all, really, isn't it? And learning to trust that it's the trust, as you said. It's such a biggie to trust.
Yeah, that surrendering to self. Yeah.
And I guess that you said that abrupt kind of journey is it's abrupt because it's taken that arrow in people's lives that has been pointed outward into the external world, looking for that sense of direction or value or whatever it is, safety, security, and now it's like that abruptness is like, oh no, come back in and discover who you are and connect with yourself, and then discover what that passion or that next step is, and start to cultivate that connection and trusting and listening. And then we doubt and the control comes in, or
it's a continual dance, isn't it? There's always this dance between being and moving and knowing and not knowing, and pushing and surrendering, and also resisting and being in flow. And so whenever, you know, that's a really good sort of self-regulation for me, is that I notice that if I'm feeling any resistance, this desire to either push through or push back, I try and pull back away from it. I soften into it, because there's something here for me to learn about myself.
Push, you know, it's like the polarity, you know, to kind of push against or push with, but then that drop in deep in, to go beyond that polarized kind of push and pull. Is that what you mean?
Yes, and I think whenever we come across resistance, there's something for us to learn from it. You know, there's an aspect of ourself that needs to come up and be looked at.
And so that's when it can move into the past life, right?
Yeah, or even into, you know, an experience from this life. Yeah.
Would you say, actually that's an interesting question. Would you say that it is even necessary to do the past life, or is it just only necessary to really look at this life, that it has everything required just in this life?
Well, I think this is my kind of answer to that, I guess, is that whenever things are really wacky, when there are situations happening and you think, I just cannot make head nor tail of this, I don't understand it, it makes no sense to me, often those are the situations that can be addressed by looking into a past life thing. There's often a link in there. Those situations that make no sense. Why a co-worker is totally on your case the whole time. You know, you don't know where that attitude or that energy came from. You know, often it's a past life experience that you had with that person in another time.
And how would people, okay, so that's a good one for that one. And then, you know, another area that you know, definitely familiar with as well is inner child or this lifetime. So how would somebody recognize that it's, we'll say it's something from this life or an inner child or, you know, their younger version?
Yeah, I think I find it very easy to recognize the inner child because I feel it. So there's this thing that I've only figured out slightly in a scientific way how I do it, but I somehow have this ability to become in sort of, I guess, in congruence or in confluence or in that my energy is able to come into alignment with your energy. And so that's how I can see and feel what's going on in people's bodies, because I energetically can move into your energy. And so I feel that in a child aspect. And then the way that I work with it is that I ask the inner child to show themselves. And then I see how old they are, or I ask them how old they are, and then I have a dialogue with them. So I think how we can recognize it for ourselves is that our inner child is the one that comes and trips us up, where something happens and it's like they just take us out. And we don't know why, but it's this hidden element of an emotional aspect from our early life. It's a wounding that we probably contracted to create when we were sorting out what we were going to do in this lifetime. So we come here and it keeps showing up until we attend to it. And it gets bigger and stronger and louder until we attend to it.
From your, you know, any insight, just, I know your conversations with Gaia and that, but, you know, just, yeah, for the upcoming months, year, any further insights that you could offer for people?
Well, she talks about this month of May as being the fulcrum month for this year. She spoke of our having 3 phases in this change, and we're in phase 2 now, where we're having this crossover, where things are being crumbled and released, and old paradigms and old patterns, old structures all falling apart. And at the same time, we're bringing in the new over the top. And so lots of people, they already have their missions for this time. So, you know, there are people who know that they're here to look at the health system. There are people who know that they are here to have a new way of bringing education through in our world, and all of the other main systems. There are already people who have those roles allocated to them, and many of them have those templates in place. So we will begin to see those swap in and out. Energetically, today, actually, this morning, she showed me that the beings in our inner earth, so the inner earth, over the last few years, I've been watching, as I built my relationship with her, I've been watching the inner earth be cleared. So there's a whole lot of, it's one of the videos and I want to do this week, hopefully, is just to talk about that. So the whole inner earth has been cleared out over the past few years, and then now we've moved to clearing the surface. And so...
Well, what's been cleared out?
Pardon?
What's been cleared out? When you say it's been cleared out, what's been cleared out?
So what's been cleared out is beings who are here working in a very dark and evil sense. So many of them have been moved out. Some of the what are they called? Some of the symbols and signatures and templates that have been buried deep in the earth to hold us in density, they've been removed. This ongoing clearing has swept through, and yeah, today, so the inner earth cities have sent some new technology out into the ethers to clear the debris out of the energetic fields around the planet. because we are getting ready and prepared to be thrust through the galaxy into a new dimensional frequency as a planet. So there's a bit more to that, but
look forward to hearing more on that video.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. So you know the window for that is going to open in the next few days, and she's always very careful about dates because she doesn't want people to be panicking about things. You know, and it all happens in relation to consciousness as well. You know, so we move in these places when we have an amount of consciousness that allows us to. So that's our process. We're always releasing and then bringing in new codes, and releasing and bringing in new frequencies, and releasing and upgrading our DNA. It's a continual process. But yeah, this is a very strong thrust. So, and there's been another time since I've been working with her where she has, I think 2 other times where she's shown me that we've moved further into the photonic belt. But this is like a it's a big movement.
It's pretty epic, isn't it? We've no idea really. I mean, you seem to have, you know, this connection which is giving you a lot of information, but in general, you know, most of us have no idea. I think nobody can really have, you know, the full scope of it. It just feels like it's so monumental and it's so new that we're just on this real precipice of the grandest evolutionary expansion, and most of us don't even realize.
Yes, and so it's all about our own individual work, you know, so we do our own clearing and we do our own inner work so that we can take in higher frequencies, higher light, and then we actually come into a place where we're working in co-creation with one another. You know, so that's our new world. We build it together. We build it in co-creation. So, you know, that's actually, there's a video here and I put together about that, which is asking people to create their own signature and anchor in the frequency of our new earth through a guided meditation.
Beautiful. Lovely. I'm tempted just to ask you one more question, and it's just something we touched on before we started recording. Just aware that there is all this information you talked about, like the darker energies and that, and this, you know, all this information that people are discovering or tuning into, and the shock, and you know, that level. Can you speak to that and how people can navigate that?
Yes, definitely. Well, I think that it's important to know that some of these things exist. Gaia and I have had quite long conversations about being concerned about humanity in their having these things revealed to them, some of the dark and evil things that have happened in our world, and that people will have cognitive dissonance around it and go into shock. And so, you know, I want to say to people, you don't have to go and find out everything, but you do need to become aware of some of the manipulative, controlling, and dark, evil things that have been occurring in our world. But it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole and get stuck and find yourself in overwhelm and despair. And don't do that to yourself. You know, take a little nibble at the edges of it, do it a little bit at a time, and recognize that the more that you see into that end of the spectrum, that it allows you to see more into the light. You know, that as we stretch into that, we can stretch into the light. And so it's a good thing to be aware of it. You just have to be not drowning in it and not swimming in it. So you have a little look at it, and you know, maybe you put your toe in the water with it, and then you come back to this neutral, and you top yourself up with your own beauty and your own essence and your own love. You know, this journey to self-love is a really big aspect we haven't even talked about. But you can only love another as much as you can love yourself. and you can only be loved by another as much as you can love yourself. Yeah, so it's that, and so it's about acknowledging it, but not lolling about in it. You know, so you acknowledge that these things have happened, and then you recognize that it's a part of the duality, the polarity, and then you bring yourself back into center with it. And it's about accepting it. So you try not to reject it, but to accept that it has occurred, and that it allows us to bring in more light. So it allows us to move into a greater place of beauty and harmony and peace, because it's the contrast. You know, we don't want that, therefore we want this. So that's how we have to run our systems, run our thoughts, run our heart, run our energetic bodies, our energetic fields, to hold greater love.
I'm so glad that you said that the further you go into the shadow, we'll call it, the further you can go into the light and have that expanse, because that has to be, there's so many dynamics, and there's some that's just staying in the light and not willing to really embrace that shadow aspect, which of course is an inner journey and an outer journey, and missing out on that. And I've really felt in my own life, and even just over this lockdown period, that the more I'm willing to really go on that bit of a journey, and as you said, not hang out in it too long, but be willing to do a bit of deep diving insofar as I get it. And it's probably the level that you're saying, the acceptance that this is actually happening. This is not just hearsay, because I would have heard it years ago, but really kind of look into it deeper and just trust that. And then I might have a reaction, whether it's shock, disbelief, anger, sadness. And then if I can just kind of let it go then and step back from it, and as you said, come back to my center, hug a tree. It's always good in the forest, get my feet in the earth, come back to the center, let it go, and then I can feel this incredible spaciousness in my beingness to hold, to allow for both polarities. To really allow.
Yes, it's very expansive, that feeling, actually.
Empowering, like I feel empowered by it, rather than, it's like it gives me a new level of empowerment once I can kind of move through those layers of what it stirs up emotionally.
Yes, absolutely. And I spent most of my life in spiritual bypass. I didn't look at any of that. So it's been a real test, I suppose, for me to be able to, when I realized that I'd done spiritual bypass, well, then I had to deal with my own inner shadow. That's a lot of the work of letting go of the all of these ideas that I don't have anger, that I don't have negativity, because I'm so sweet and nice and full of love, which I am, but all of that other stuff was tucked down, well compressed, and underneath all of that. And so because I had done that personal work of attending to looking at my own shadow and where it came from, and absorbing that and accepting that, which is, a long process I mean, that's a program on its own, isn't it? But to see this, to witness these things, to observe these things that were beyond my capacity to understand, and I did. I spent 3 entire days crying when I started to look into some of this. And I think, sometimes I'm guided to do more of that so I can have greater understanding in my work with Gaia, in terms of for the people of the planet, really. And so I think sometimes I experience things so I can have a broader spectrum. But that when I had done that and processed and cried for the children and cried for the mothers and cried for the persecuted, and without going into the details of that, it was empowering to stand in that sort of neutral zone, in that 0 point, and to be able to look down that line at all that dark and to realize that I could see further up into the light, and that by doing that, it helped me to come into greater balance, into greater harmony, and into greater power and empowerment. And then it enabled me, and this is what Gaia said about this process, is that then you choose, where are you going to be on that line? You're in you're in the knowledge of knowing that that exists. Where are you going to place yourself? If we're talking, we're talking in a lineal sense, which is just out of simplicity. But where is it you're going to place yourself? And that's our choice.
Yeah. What frequency are you going to choose?
Yeah.
What radio station, or what storyline, or what timeline?
That's right. Yeah, and there's a few of those in existence at the moment. So she shows me an interesting aspect of that, which is that there are 3 main timelines. There are 2 cyclic loops that come off, one at the beginning and one at the end. 2 timelines that have more predominance, and one that's very sort of, there's not enough strength to it. She says we don't even need to look at it. But it's this, she speaks about people who, there are people who are not going to be awakened enough, and they will go, or not do enough of their work, and they will go into what she calls a dimensional loop. And so they will recycle what the earth has been doing for the last, 300,000 years or so. And so there's one at the beginning of these parallel timelines, and then there's one at the end, but then they all come back into the same timeline. So one definitely has that AI aspect, and then one is more this aspect of working with higher dimensional frequencies in a 5th dimensional world, and moving towards that. So we already are, according to Gaia, in our 5th dimensional world, and our job is to anchor it more strongly. That's the job for light workers. And to help also to transmute some of the density and murkiness, I guess, in people's fields, the pain, the anxiety, the shock, the trauma, for light workers to try and transmute a bit of that to help the collective. And then we move into that 5th dimensional world. So I don't know exactly how all that pans out.
Yeah. What advice would you have with that idea of transmuting? I guess I'm just curious myself, actually, because that sometimes that is this mine, is the collective, and how do you navigate that? Do you just allow?
I think developing good spiritual hygiene is the way for light workers to do that, or people who are sensitive. So there are lots of ways to do that. So you can work with sprays, you can work with washing your hands in salt or sea salt, have a tub of that in the bathroom, and when you've been out in the world, wash your hands up to your elbows. Every time you get in the shower, ask that it be washed off body, out of your field. You can use crystals. You can use crystals to do that. You can use a selenite wand to wave around your field, ask for it to be transmuted. You can use herbs to burn sage, burn incense, and purge it out of your system. You can use clapping and clap up your field and just ask that it be released from your field. You can use bells, bowls.
Intention, isn't it, really?
And you can call upon the ascended masters. You can use the violet flame of Saint Germain. All of those things, but working with intention. So recognizing it, doing it regularly, recognizing that your field it easily picks up things from other places and buildings and people, and that we just need to be having good hygiene. So it's good spiritual hygiene. So what I talk to people about is doing that 3 times a day. So do it when you wake up, because in your dream time you might have picked things up if you've left your body, and a lot of people do in the night, even if they don't know they have. To ask your higher self to let go of anything that doesn't belong or serve the body, the energetic body, the physical body. Just allow that to be cleared before you get out of bed. and then to do, just to do something else during the day and to do the same thing before you go to sleep. Because at the moment, there's a lot in the collective energy field. So we need to
we've
be...
got plenty of time for this.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we'll wrap it up. Do you have any last comments before we wrap it up?
Yeah, that it's all going to be amazing. And that, we really need to sit in that place of reassuring ourselves and our loved ones that it is okay, that we're going through this massive, massive change, this transmutation, this transmigration, a lot of the trans words really, into the way in which we've perhaps thought about all our lives. We're moving into paradise, into the garden and back into the Garden of Eden, where our world is going to be this place that's full of beauty and full of people working in a cooperative and co-creative way to live a life that is sustaining for self and for the planet, where all of our basic human needs are met. And so we won't be driven by those old paradigms of go to work to pay for the car in order to take you to work, in order to pay for the clothes that you need to have for work, in order to, pay for the parking, etc. All of those drivers for, needing to work long hours in order to create more money, in order to buy more material possessions, that's all going to fall away. We're moving into our new world where we are, going to be working in playful, creative ways of moving energy and, into that new time, which is going to be super exciting and full of exploratory ideas.
I said to Steve, because it feels like we're, like, in essence, we are living that, that's our lifestyle, and that's yours as well. So we've created, and so it's interesting to live in that place and yet have the awareness that many just outside our boundaries isn't necessarily their perspective or isn't necessarily how they live. So I'll just leave it one last question because it popped into my head as well. Because I know we've all had challenges with our awakening journey, and where people in our family or friends isn't necessarily in that place where we are, and we start to feel that drift or be misunderstood. What advice would you have to people that may be going through that?
Oh, I think we have to be mindful that it's not our job. It's not our job to help anybody awaken. That it's our job to hold space, it's our job to clear space, and it's our job to be there to hold people as they're going through their awakening when they make that choice, and to answer their questions. So, their way of awakening will be different to ours. What they need to know in order to become awakened might be a totally different set of paradigms, parameters. What they have to undo might be different. And so in a way we're there as the person who can stand beside them and answer their questions, but mostly to let them know it's okay, that it all unfolds, and that once we begin, there's no going back. We've had that experience, right? You can't unsee what you see. You can't undo once you start on the spiritual journey. And there are days where you think, let me just go back. But you can't. It's impossible. It's impossible because you're driven by your soul. You're driven by your inner spirit. So, yeah, I think to not fear, to be sitting in that freedom of allowing other people to do their awakening journey, and we are the supporters on the sideline, and we can answer their questions.
Yeah, and another thing that comes to me as well is I get reminded of and have a deep knowing about as well is just to and it took me a while to really get it. It's like just by being our shine, being our radiance, through our self-care and self-love and following our joy, that is the greatest invitation for others.
Yes.
I'm being told, and it's definitely a part of my journey to zip it and pull back, you know, and stop trying to, you know, be bossy around other people's journey, and to, you know, come into that realization, I'm just responsible for me and my energy. And then if that's applied for others, great. If it's not, I've learned, gone into this deep, just honoring of other people's journey, and disconnecting from that attachment that I had for them.
And so much freedom can be found in that.
Because I can just be myself, and I don't have to be so reactive or controlling, actually, even to my environment, to try and micromanage other people's reality or my own in relation to theirs.
Yeah. And that's a journey in itself, I think, to get to that place where you can give up the responsibility of anybody else's awakening. But it doesn't mean that when they put their hand out, you know, you can hold their hand and tell them that it's all perfect.
Yeah, and I feel like as well, it's just actually being even that presence, even if we don't know people, that we're a presence just by us being centered, that it's given out that possibility.
Yes, and if you think about, if we have really good spiritual hygiene, then, you know, we're always transmuting some of the other bits that are around us that we pick up just through leaving the house, really, and sometimes through not even leaving the house, because there's been a lot of energy that, you know, I've been describing to people. It's a bit like being in a giant pot of vegetable soup out there at the moment. You know, so.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, take a breath with that. Let those energies flow. Should we end it here?
Yeah, let's end it here.
We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much. Love hearing all you've got to say and all the insights and wisdom, and thank you for sharing so much of your journey. I loved listening to it, and I'm sure there's so much in here that would be interesting for others as well.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I always enjoy chatting to you. And you ask such good questions.
Oh, good. Curious.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that there is space for things like this, because people are curious, and, you know, there's always choices, and there's always more than one way to do everything. Yeah,
and I know in my own journey, you know, sometimes it's just hearing something and it's like, oh yeah, you know, that reminder you give that everything's going to be okay, you know, and, you know, we do need those little reminders, and we can feel that truth and that resonance, and you're like, oh yeah, my mind will get caught up again, you know, in the worry or the concern, and I know that deep down.
Yes, and, you know, for me, that's been my personal blessing to be working with Gaia, because, you know, she's never, the only time in all of this time when I speak to her nearly every day, the only thing that she has ever expressed concern about was when we were talking about worrying about people going into a lot of fear and despair over what is, you know, going to be revealed.
And you talked to her today, so I mean, we're really in the epicenter of it now.
Yeah, we are.
Breath.
Yeah, the breath's a great tool.
Okay, beautiful. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.